Entire villages were burned, cattle were confiscated, and the people were terrorized into submission. Men were publicly flogged in front of their families, women were beaten, and anyone suspected of aiding Bambatha was branded an enemy of the crown. Welcome to Omar's story Nook, where history gets spicy, legends get a remix, and rebellion doesn't whisper, it roars. Every tale you hear is a whisper of Omar, echoing across rivers and gorges, through cattle dust and spear shadows, drumming up from the roots of the land to remind us the soil remembers, and so do the people. This is not just a story about tax, it's about greed masked as law, dignity treated as disruption, and the moment when a kingdom known for its silence decided to shout. The year is 1906, South Africa. The British Empire, greedy, proud, and bloated, tightens its grip. The Zulu people, once feared, now taxed to the bone. Every hut, every man, even the dead. The colonizers thought the Zulu would bow, but then came a chief, not a king in crown, but a lion in blood, Bambatha, kaMancinza. He didn't give speeches in London, he didn't write letters to parliament, he said just one word, no, then vanished into the hills and returned with warriors. This is the story of how cows sparked a rebellion, how rhythm became resistance, how one chief's roar still rumbles through the chest of a nation. This is the Bambatha rebellion. When the Zulus stood tall, looked empire in the eye and said, "We are not afraid." The year is 1906, and the land trembles under boots that do not belong. The British Empire's control over the Zulu tightened with the imposition of the poll tax, £1 per adult male. It wasn't based on income or property, it was simply a tax for existing. The Zulu people, already burdened with heavy taxes, were now expected to pay for their very lives. But the cruelty didn't stop there. The British also taxed the dead. Families who had recently lost loved ones were forced to pay a tax on their deceased relatives, an unimaginable insult to their ancestral traditions. The Zulu believed that the spirits of the dead lived on and deserved respect, and to disturb the dead in this way was seen as an affront to both their ancestors and their dignity. Chief Bambatha, witnessing the suffering of his people and the violation of sacred customs, refused to stand by. He did not appeal to Parliament, nor did he protest in the streets. Instead, he vanished into the Nkandla Forest, a place where the earth itself held the memory of his ancestors. He did not come back with petitions. He came back with warriors ready to fight for their land, their dignity, and their future. This was not just a revolt against taxation, it was a stand against the very erasure of Zulu identity. The resistance had begun, and Bambatha was not just a leader, he was the spark of rebellion that would rise from the roots of the land itself. The Nkandla Forest became more than a sanctuary, it became the birthplace of resistance. Bambatha knew that in his land, the trees held memories, the rivers whispered secrets, and the mountains stood as witnesses to every battle fought. There, he found his advantage. With no cannons or uniforms, he had something even more powerful: the land itself. It was his people's home, their heritage, and their strength. The rebellion spread quickly, reaching every corner of the Zulu heartland. Farmers, laborers, young boys, and old men all united under Bambatha's call to arms. It wasn't a conventional army they assembled, but a people united in purpose. They didn't march in rows, they moved like shadows, using guerrilla tactics that the British had never anticipated. Ambushes and hit and run strikes became their weapons of choice. When the British sent patrols into the hills, they vanished without a trace. Bambatha's warriors knew the terrain like the back of their hands, and each strike was a reminder that the land could not be conquered by foreign boots. For the first time in years, the people of the Zulu felt hope. Bambatha wasn't just the chief, he was the pulse of their collective heart, the embodiment of their refusal to submit. This was not just a rebellion, it was a reclaiming of their dignity, their land, and their future. The British Empire, humiliated by Bambatha's success, retaliated with brutal force. They sent in thousands of reinforcements, armed with rifles, machine guns, and the belief that they could crush the spirit of the Zulu. The imperial response was swift and savage. Entire villages were burned, cattle were confiscated, and the people were terrorized into submission. Men were publicly flogged in front of their families, women were beaten, and anyone suspected of aiding Bambatha was branded an enemy of the crown. It was not just a military response, it was an effort to break the very spirit of resistance. But Bambatha would not break. He withdrew deeper into the Nkandla Forest, a place that had sheltered his people for generations, and prepared for one final stand. At Mom Gorge, the Zulu warriors, with shields in hand and hearts full of defiance, gathered together. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with the fury of those who had nothing left to lose. For hours, they stood their ground, facing machine guns with courage that only history could understand. The British may have claimed victory that day, but Bambatha's defiance could not be erased. His rebellion had not ended. It had only transformed into a legend, one that would echo through the generations. Though Bambatha's rebellion was crushed in the bloodied hills of Mom Gorge, it did not die. The British might have silenced the battle drum, but they could not silence the memory of the rebellion. Bambatha's name became a symbol of resistance, whispered from one generation to the next. Even as the British moved to enforce Asha control, the people of South Africa carried Bambatha's spirit within them. In villages across Natal, they carved his name into doorposts, painted it on shields, and told the stories of the chief who said no when the world demanded submission. Bambatha's defiance was not just a rebellion, it was a revolution of memory. His spirit endured in every song sung, every chant spoken, and every fist raised in resistance. As South Africa moved toward the dark days of apartheid, Bambatha's legacy flickered in the hearts of those who would not forget. In the ANC's founding years, in the defiance campaigns, in the protest of Soweto, Bambatha's defiance lived on. His rebellion was not crushed, it was planted. And from that seed, a movement grew, one that would echo through time, a drumbeat that would never stop. In the Nkandla Forest, some say you can still hear it, the low, steady thump of resistance. Bambatha did not die. He became a drum, and that drum still beats. They tried to bury a chief, but they planted a story. They silenced a rebellion, but they woke a rhythm. Bambatha was not just a man, he was a moment. When the soil spoke back, when memory rose with a spear in its hand, when the Zulu did not flinch beneath empire's heel, and though the bullets rained, though the hills wept, though the grass still remembers the red that soaked it, the drum kept beating. It beat in Soweto, it beat on Robben Island, it beat in chants, in fists, in ballots, it beat in the silence between the laws, it beat in the hearts of people who refused to bow. And now, it beats in you, because resistance is not always a war. Sometimes it's a name you say with pride, a truth you teach your children, a no that echoes so loudly it becomes a nation's never again. So, if you ever hear thunder over dry plains, don't be afraid. That's just Bambatha, still walking, still watching, still beating the drum. The Bambatha rebellion, when the Zulus said no and the world learned to listen. Until the next whisper of Oma, stay listening.